that we were actually supposed to get our independence in 1978, but there were certain demands that the founding father was quite staunch and steadfast about in terms of how he wants to see this democracy unfold. Reflect a little bit on that pause at 78 and now coming into the 80s where you had to really start shaping things for the independence of Namibia.
Yeah, I think we shouldn't forget that there was Resolution 365 of 1976, one of the other resolutions that describe how Namibia comes to independence as well. And we must remember also there was the contact group, France, German,
the Western contact group.
Yeah, the contact group, the negotiating group from the West, France, German, Canada, United Kingdom, and the United States of America. And that contact group did come about because it was suggested that initially the Western said that, yeah, you people are leaning too much to the East. And said, well, what did you do to assist us? We came to you to say, don't support apartheid regime. And, you know, Peter Kachavi will reflect much, much better on that one as my mentor as well. And that's where I got the picture from. And then in 78, 435 was then passed. And at that time, we were preparing for the campaign for the independence. But there was one tricky situation, and that is the situation of the South African troops in Namibia. Where should they be? They wanted to be somewhere in Grootfontein, and the argument was, hang on a minute, you know, chaps, you are going home. Go all the way home. And there was a little bit in the negotiation, because remember, there was the armed struggle, there was the diplomatic struggle, there was the mobilization struggle inside Namibia that we were engaged in, and we were fed information as to what we need to prepare in order to prepare for the independence. And we had to mobilize inside the country itself to prepare for the independence process that was going to take place. But of course, that was halted until much later. And in 1978 as well, you will recall that there was a formulation of the type of skeleton of the constitution that was going to be adopted in Namibia, proposed by the contact group, by the 5 contact group that was then coming from the Security Council and to the Secretary General, and for them to say that this should be some of the principles that must be reflected in the Namibian constitution.
What do you make of this? Because I like the way you put it, where you say, look, there were a number of the struggle was on a number of fronts.
Yes.
You know, diplomatic on one end, mobilization here on the ground, so military action there as well. But particularly during the time now in exile, meeting him in London, reflect a little bit on his leadership style in as far as mobilizing international support is concerned, and how it also engaged some of the non-governmental organizations or non-state actors.
Yeah,
here.
I think it would be unfair to, because I haven't actually encountered him a lot of times, but for him to actually take time and to say, I've heard that the SWAPO party flag was hosted by the anti-apartheid movement with the Namibian Support Committee inside the United Kingdom, and he made an effort to come and address the people in Sheffield in the town hall. Now, within the United Kingdom, from 1981 when I went down there, every time that there is a meeting, you'll find that Comrade Sharper at the head office or Comrade Jacob Hanai will send out a message to say, could you go and address these people? Can you go and address these miners, etc.? So we used to go out in the morning to our educational institutions, and in the afternoon you've got the political bag and you go around, and trains and buses, etc., to speak to the populace as well. And sometimes when there are events like the Nottingham Carnival as well, we would join them, but promoting the independence of the Republic of Namibia as SWAPO members and SWAPO students at that time as well, especially with Comrade Beans Kavanas, Abraham Yambo, loads of other people, Zoom Bakwe and all the others, including our Judge President Damasep as well, and also Honorable Utoni Nujoma, who later on came to Warwick University to study law as well. So the students in the UK were not only studying, they were actually campaigning and mobilizing and also supporting each other and supporting the liberation struggle. And there was also the campaign for medical aid for refugee settlements in Angola and in Zambia as well, that a lot of the students were engaged as well. And every time that you go to address people, they will offer money, they will give checks addressed to SWAPO, of course. So we had to do that as well. But the significant thing is this, that there was a leader who was not in Namibia, but was crisscrossing all over the whole world to try and prompt up support. And at the same time, that support was on all 3 fronts: education for Namibians, military support, diplomatic support. And you need to look at the leaders that we have in Namibia as well, and those that passed on, such as our late President, Dr. Hage Gottfried Kenkop. He mentored so many of them. And I always say that when His Excellency came from exile to start the government, he was spoiled with talent. He was spoiled with capacity. He had everyone else to pick. There was a government already sitting, ready. Although there was never a government in exile, there was a government ready, sitting to come and take over. So, but his role was more inspirational. We stood at Covent Garden singing, Nujoma, Tukwatela Commission, all these songs that we have sung in the liberation struggle then. So it was only after independence, when I started now planning to come back, that I first went to his farm at Tetunda in 2008. That was the very first encounter. And I came there and he said, what time is he going to come? And I said, I'll come at 10 o'clock. And he prepared everybody else and said, yeah, this comrade from London, he will be here on time, watch out. And then Asino met me at the crawl of the kettle to take him to him. And we spent 3 hours talking with him, the two of us. There's a picture of me with him just sitting on the couch, talking and talking. And I remember asking him, Comrade President, why did you decide to step down as president of the party? He said, well, some of us are designed for certain times, and when those times comes in, we have, of course, to move on and give other comrades to take over. And then in 2008, I was still in the United Kingdom, and he asked me the question and said, are you armed? I said, what do you mean, Comrade President? He said, do you understand law? I said, no, I'm a maxillofacial surgeon, I operate on the jaws, etc. And said, no, you need, if you've got an opportunity, to go and study a bit of law. We liberated the country, a few compromises, but these people are squeezing us with the legal bits here. So that's when I went to go and study law as well.
As we're closing off the chat, I think I will be doing it injustice if I don't ask this question, but we know, of course, it was that conversion from being a commander of a liberation movement and now the advent of independence and switching now your leadership from being a military commander now to coming in and becoming a president that must uphold these democratic ideals, following of the rule of law, not ostracizing political opponents, etc. Just speak to me about his legacy that he leaves behind in the country around political tolerance and freedom for one to practice different political ideologies within this country without really being ostracized. If you look at it since independence, nobody has been jailed or locked up for having a completely different view or extrajudicial political killings taking place here in the country. Just in conclusion, if you can reflect on that.
We need to understand that Comrade Sam Nujoma was the custodian of our Namibian constitution that provided us that very democratic principles that we believe in. And one thing that really struck me, given the history of political parties being formed, is the fact that when I stood as an independent presidential candidate, I did not see the famous pointing finger of Tatekulu condemning me or condemning anything. He did not voice anything about Dr. Itula as an independent presidential candidate. But when you go back to the other COD, RDP, there was quite a time that he was pointing fingers to them. But for some reasons here, he embraced the democratic principles and allowed us to freely exercise our political activities, irrespective of which political party. The formation of IPC was demonstrative there too as well. After IPC was formed, we have not had a single voice from His departed Excellency against the will of the Namibian people wherever they are to exercise their political activities. And we need to underscore that he embraced us all as a father figure, and he went into retirement and allowed everyone else to flourish in this environment of political freedom. When you go to other countries, we did not have that. And that is one thing that we as Namibians constantly united under that principle of our departed leader, we must remember. Every time that we feel that we are falling by the way, think about that embracing big hand of the founding father that keeps us together. And we need to remember to continue to do so and maintain the peace that he fought so hard. He sacrificed not only his own youth, he left at the age of 33, he sacrificed his own marriage, leaving children, young children, in old location when he left this country. He sacrificed his own education, rather prompting other people up to go and study. He could have decided, let me be selfish and go and study. He was a selfless leader, a negotiator, a patient leader, consistent leader who persevered over the many years of being in exile until independence. So we've got a gem of a leader that we must really keep really to our hearts.
Thank you very much, Dr. Itula,
Thank you very
for
much.
making time out to just come and talk to us and reflect a little bit. It's not always, it's not very often that we hear about some of the inner workings, particularly before independence, when it comes to the party and our different leaders as well. So thank you for making time out to be with us
Thank you
today.
very much indeed.
That's the president of the Independent Patriots for Change.
We are both celebrating his life, but at the same time, sadly, mourning his passing. And it's very, very strange that yesterday at 12 noon, I had a meeting in Swakopmund with many of my party leaders. But before I started that meeting, something was telling me a message. And I then asked for us to have a moment of reflection and remembering that he was under these circumstances. And we had a moment. This is very unusual. You don't have a moment of silence when somebody's in hospital. But somehow something has driven. And 1 o'clock in the morning, I received a call from a senior member of the party of SWAPO to say that, unfortunately, our president has passed on. And that is the time that I got it. And I went into this silence and reflection. And I've got that mourning of myself that I go in and look at everything else. So it's a celebration, but at the same time, it's a sadness as well, especially for his family, his close friends, his close comrades, etc. But it's a legacy that he has left of what he has done for Namibia. Yeah.
If we can take a step back, when was your first, because we know, of course, he was in exile for 29 years.
Yeah.
And for many people that were internally in the country, it was first the story, reputation before you physically meet him for the first time.
Yeah.
When was the first time you've heard about him, and what was your first encounter like when you met him for the first time?
Well, back in 1971, when the worker strike started, I was, of course, born in Windhoek, and I was brought up not very far from where Tatekulu had their house as well in the 50s as well. And when the worker strike in December started.
Which house is that you're referring to now?
In the old location.
In the old location,
yes.
Now. All right.
Now, in 1971, now what I'm trying to describe here is the myth of Sam Nujoma that we've never met as young people as we're growing up, and the influence that he had to give us that energy and engine inside Namibia throughout the 70s until my first encounter of meeting him in 1981 when I just left prison into exile.
So what was the myth like?
This 70s, you had the myth of the freedom fighters. And there was this myth which says that the freedom fighters were cooked in pots, and, you'll understand when it comes to meeting him what it meant then as well. And in the 1970s, all we used to do is go into the location from Benjamin Namalambo's house, singing Sema Ulipe Nielu Le Pandela, Sema Ulipe Nielu Le Pandela, and go to the meetings then as well. And at the same time, we need to understand the crucial timing in 1976. And that is the time that there were troubles in the party, the Shipanga years in exile, etc. And that was also the year that the first SWAPO party constitution was actually crafted and adopted. Before that, there was only the little booklet that Ngarikutike Chiriange has actually, with Amel Apollos, actually put together. That's the only guiding principle until the Tanga Conference of 1969-70 and also 1976 when the first constitution came in. The Tanga Conference created also the wings as well, the SWAPO Youth League, the Women Council, and the elders.
Within
so
the
before
party
that, in 1973, we belonged to Namibian Black Students Organization, which was led by Vekwi Rukoro, and the Secretary General was, of course, Tapopi, Nashilongo Tapopi, who was also the youngest political prisoner on Robben Island from Namibia, amongst all the political prisoners, including those of South Africa. Now, in 1973, the SWAPO Youth League was then established. And that's when we were moved away from the Namibian Black Students Organization to the SWAPO Youth League. But at that time, the internal structure was not properly formulated. And it was in 1976 that the first Congress of the SWAPO of Namibia was established in Walvis Bay, where all the leadership was then elected. When those leaderships were elected in 1978, after the passing of Resolution 435, SWAPO of Namibia had been given permission by the South African regime to establish an office in Windhoek. Initially, it was in Dongerhoek in a roof, and then it moved to somebody's house in Klein Windhoek, and then to the Lutheran Church. In 78, we were then allowed to campaign openly, although we were victimized still, and we established an office where Chongarero and Klabanero and Axel Johannes and Franz Kambangula and Reverend Chirimwe, Reverend Carrera, all the officers were there. And it's quite ironic that Gwen Lister was here, but we were operating at that office and it was broken in after everybody was arrested. And I remember Gwen in February 1979 coming to our office, then working for the Observer with Smithy, to come and take those pictures. And one of the pictures was the picture of Comrade Sam Nujoma, torn to pieces on the ground, of course. So the 70s, we were campaigning internally, mobilizing, motivated by the leadership of Comrade Sam Nujoma at that time.
And is this even while he's in exile?
While he's in exile,
is there?
while we have not seen him at all. And it was just that. And in 1979, we all were arrested and went to prison. And inside prison, when I was arrested, I was initially at the Bahnhof political prisoners. And if you were to meet with Nico Smith, he was one of the people who worked on the other side at that time as a police officer. And I would be singing Sema Ulife and teaching all these people who have been arrested without pass books into the cells as well. And later on transferred to Hobabes, where all the entire leadership was. That leadership was elected in 76, and that is the leadership inside the country that was mobilizing people, the leadership that was taking people out. We used to take people out to Hobabes to go into exile, to go to the north, to go into exile, feeding the liberation struggle. And this is where the struggle inside Namibia under the leadership of both Nathaniel Mahulili, actually Mahulili is just his nickname, Nathaniel Mahulili, was so significant in formulating that. And we should not forget Keshi Nathaniel, of course, the first president of the SWAPO Youth League when it was established in 1973. And I remember on the 12th of August 1973, when we had a meeting at what we call now the ShopRite in Katutura area there, and Comrade Jerry Ekanjo stood up and said that, and it was all under the theme of Sema Olipeni and all the others. We were all inspired, and we've never seen this man, this leader at all, this inspiration of Namibians at all. And it's when he said, rivers of blood will flow for Namibia's independence. And that was the reason why Comrade Jerry Ekanjo was arrested and later on in prison in Robben Island, together with Nashilongo Tapopi. Now, fast forward, we were then released from prison and then put under house arrest, and then the church organized for us to go into exile. So I went to London.
So this is now 1981?
1981. So I went into London. And then Comrade Sam Nujoma then came to London in April to a function, a reception there was there. And I remember coming to that reception, and he stood at that reception straight with a serviette and a glass of orange. And he stood still listening to these people speaking. And then we went off to President Hotel in London. And he went, of course, in his room, and we were sitting in the living room. And it's me and late Tate Nangolo Damkwilongo, who was also a political prisoner. And we sat down there with the chief representative of SWAPO. And I was only in London in a few weeks, and the chief representative, Shapwa Kaupungwa, came into the reception area from the bedroom, of course, and he said, yeah, the president wants to see you. I said, I've never seen Nujoma before. And inside Namibia, I thought, all these freedom fighters we used to deal with the typhoons and tsumeb, etc., cooked in pots, etc.
So all this information is running through your head now.
And then His Excellency Dr. Shafiishuna Nujoma came out of his room, and we all stood up. And I looked at this person And I looked at and said, Shuambo, Kashimba Patele kwa mempiala kulane. This one must have been cooked in a bigger pot because it's the president.
Just a larger than life presence.
Yes, here is the life president. And then Comrade Shapwa Kaukunga said, Comrade President, this is your political prisoners. He is the youngest, he is the oldest. And he greeted us there, and the television was on. And then Lord Carrington, who was the foreign minister of the United Kingdom at that time, was on the screen. And Tatekulu said there and said, these people, they are taking out our resources and our wealth. That is the first time I heard him speaking. Our economic wealth is being taken out. And the way he spoke, now I had this struggle between the one speaking and the myth itself. But subsequent to that, we then, when I stayed in the UK, we invited him to Sheffield in 1987 when we hosted the SWAPO flag then. And he came and saw the flag that and said, truly, Namibia will be independent. In that time, it was not fashionable to host a liberation movement's flag on a public building, a town council. And the SWAPO flag was the first one to be hosted there.
Particularly with that, looking at the kind of environment it was, particularly with the Cold War and the communist visits, etc., etc. I've got a number of questions still coming up on that, but I want us to go for a short break as we continue. If you just joined us, welcome, of course, to this special broadcast, the ongoing commemoration and celebration of the